Picture this, a loving wife, a solid marriage. We're partners in every sense, supporting each other, always on the same team. Life is steady, secure, the kind of stability most people only hope for. What could possibly go wrong? Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, I want to share another touching story with you. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It motivates us to create more quality content for you. Let's get started. Then, one seemingly ordinary evening, I'm helping Rachel unload groceries from her car. A bag slips, tumbling to the floorboard. I bend down to retrieve it, my fingers brushing against something unexpected, something that shouldn't be there. I pick it up, turning it over in my hands, my brain racing to make sense of it. And that's when I see something else. Rachel has never once given me a reason to doubt her. Not in 6 years. But now, standing in our garage, staring at these two things, my gut is screaming what my heart refuses to accept. You're probably thinking I should confront her immediately, demand answers. But I don't. Not yet. Because in that moment, something shifts in my mind. An idea takes root. A plan. One that will ensure she wakes up one day to find I've disappeared from her life without a trace. But let's not jump ahead. Let's go back to where it all began. Rachel and I met 6 years ago at a friend's barbecue in Denver. She was breathtaking, the kind of woman who turns heads without even trying. Chestnut hair, striking green eyes, and a laugh that could wipe your thoughts clean. But it wasn't just her looks. She was sharp, ambitious, and effortlessly funny. The kind of person you feel lucky just to talk to, let alone date. And somehow, she picked me. I'm Caleb, 33 years old, a freelance software developer. I work from home most days, though I travel now and then for tech conferences, places like Seattle, Austin, or Chicago. Rachel, on the other hand, works in corporate sales for a medical tech company in downtown Denver. She used to love it. From the moment we met, everything just clicked. It was a whirlwind romance, but one that worked. 8 months in, I proposed. A year later, we were married. For the first couple of years, life was damn near perfect. We bought a townhouse in Boulder, a quiet escape close enough for her commute but far enough from the chaos of the city. She was climbing the corporate ladder, I was building my career, and at the end of the day, we always had each other. Sunday hikes in the Flatirons, Friday movie nights in bed, summer road trips to Utah or Arizona. It felt like we had everything. Then, things started to shift. It wasn't sudden, that's what makes it so hard to pinpoint exactly when it began. Maybe it was about a year ago when her late nights at work became more frequent. At first, it was just an occasional meeting running long. Then it was twice a week. Then she was coming home at 9, sometimes 10, with a casual excuse about a client dinner or a networking event. The work trips followed. San Diego, Phoenix, Dallas. All perfectly reasonable. So I didn't question them. And then, the fights started. Rachel wasn't the type to yell or throw things. No, her frustration came in clipped responses and sharp glances, irritation over things that had never been a problem before. Like the time I suggested a weekend getaway to Breckenridge, just the two of us. Caleb, do you even think about my schedule? I have a work trip next week. I can't just drop everything. Or the time I gently asked if something was wrong, if she was okay. God, you're always overanalyzing. Not everything is about you. Little by little, she pulled away. At first, I told myself it was stress. She was working toward a promotion, after all. It made sense that she was distracted. I figured once things settled, she'd come back to me. But weeks turned to months. And she didn't. I've never been the jealous type. Never had a reason to be. But sometimes, you just know. It's in the way someone avoids eye contact when they tell you where they've been. In the way they tense up when their phone buzzes. Rachel used to be open with her phone. We'd sit on the couch together, her scrolling through Instagram, laughing as she showed me pictures of her coworkers' dogs. Then, one day, I noticed something small but significant. She started placing her phone face down. At first, I barely thought about it. But then I saw how she'd glance at a text, smirk slightly, and tilt the screen away from me. Tiny, meaningless moments on their own. But when they start stacking up, they don't feel so small anymore. It was the little things. The new lingerie she bought but never wore for me. The expensive clothes she brought home, yet I never once saw her put on. The sudden switch in perfume after 5 years of wearing the same scent. And then there were the moments she thought I wasn't watching, when she'd sit on the couch, phone in hand, smiling to herself, lost in some unseen conversation. Something wasn't right. I told myself I was overthinking it. That I was just being paranoid. After all, I had no real proof, just a handful of gut feelings and strange behavior. And then, one night, I found the first undeniable sign. It was a Friday evening, just after 7, when I heard the low hum of Rachel's red Mazda CX-5 pulling into the garage. I was still in my home office, finishing up a few emails, when I glanced at the clock and frowned. Late again. I shook the thought off, stood, and went to help her unload the groceries, because that's what a good husband does, right? She was already gathering her purse and phone when I stepped into the garage. Her expression was the same as always, calm, a little tired, the perfect image of a hard-working woman wrapping up a long week. "Hey, babe," she said with a small smile, reaching into the back seat. "Can you grab the rest?" "Sure." The trunk was packed neatly, as usual. Fresh produce, a rotisserie chicken, a bottle of white wine, nothing that set off any alarms. I reached in, stacking a few bags in my arms when one toppled over. Ah, damn it. An orange rolled under the seat, and I crouched down, stretching my hand beneath it to retrieve it. My fingers brushed against something firm and unfamiliar. A card. Even before I pulled it out, I knew it wasn't mine. A slow, creeping unease settled in my stomach as I lifted the small, white hotel key card into the light. No logo. No hotel name. Just a plain piece of plastic with a black magnetic strip on the back. Rachel doesn't travel for work. She never has. Her office is in downtown Denver, 30 minutes from our house in Boulder. There is absolutely no reason for this to be here. Before I could fully process what I was holding, my eye caught something else. A crumpled slip of paper wedged near the door pocket. It had been stepped on, creased, and partially torn, but the words were still visible. A parking receipt. No business name, no branding, just a timestamp and a partial address that had been ripped away. I stared at the two items in my hands, my mind racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Behind me, I heard Rachel humming as she walked into the house, setting the bags down on the kitchen counter. The garage door slid shut, sealing me inside with my thoughts. I knew exactly what this looked like. I just didn't want to believe it. I took a slow breath and, without hesitation, slipped both the key card and the receipt back where I found them. Not because I planned to ignore them, but because I needed more. This wasn't enough. If I confronted her now, she'd have an answer. An excuse. Maybe she'd laugh and tell me I was being ridiculous. Maybe she'd twist it around and make me doubt myself. And maybe, just maybe, she'd be right. So instead, I did the only thing I could. I played dumb. I grabbed the last 2 bags and carried them inside, setting them down next to her. She was already pouring herself a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone with the ease of someone who had nothing to hide. "Everything okay?" she asked, looking up at me. I forced a nod. "Yeah. Just thinking about dinner." She smiled and leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek. I was thinking chicken and roasted veggies. "I'm exhausted." I watched her for a moment, searching for anything, guilt, hesitation, nerves. But there was nothing. Just Rachel, the same as always. I nodded again and started putting the groceries away, my mind moving 100 miles an hour. That night, while Rachel showered, I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the muted television. The house felt too quiet, too still. I couldn't stop thinking about the hotel key card, the parking receipt. I could still feel them in my hands, like they had burned themselves into my skin. I picked up my phone and opened Google. How to track a hotel key card. Nothing. Most hotels don't print room numbers on their keys anymore. That was the moment I realized I needed a different approach. There was no way to trace the key card unless I physically went to every hotel in Boulder and Denver, sliding it through a front desk reader, hoping for a match. That wasn't happening. I leaned forward, rubbing my hands together, frustration simmering beneath my skin. The parking receipt. It had a timestamp. A clue. Proof that she had been somewhere, somewhere that required paid parking. But with no address, no identifying marks, it was nothing more than a scrap of paper. Useless. My hands curled into fists. This still wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to watch. For the next 2 weeks, I paid attention, not just to what Rachel said, but to the things she didn't. The small shifts in routine, the barely perceptible changes in behavior. She started staying out later. What used to be 1 late work event a week became 2. Then 3. By now, it was at least half the week. And unlike before, she no longer suggested I join her. She used to say, "You should come meet my coworkers." Now, if I even asked, she'd shake her head. "It's just boring networking stuff," she'd say dismissively. "You'd hate it." Then there was the phone. Rachel had never been glued to it before, but now it was always within reach. And if I so much as reached for it, to check the time, to move it off the counter, she'd snatch it away, flashing me a sweet, practiced smile. "Work stuff," she'd say casually. But I saw the way her thumb moved just a little too fast when she was deleting messages. By the time I decided to act, I no longer had doubts. Something was wrong. But knowing and proving are 2 different things. I needed to see it for myself. The idea came late one night as I sat in my office, staring at the hotel keycard I had found in Rachel's car. I had already exhausted every possible way to trace it, coming up with nothing. The parking receipt was just as worthless. I was chasing shadows. That's when it hit me. If I couldn't trace where she had been, I could track where she was going. At first, I considered a phone app. Something to quietly ping her location. But she had grown too careful. If she suspected I was tracking her, she'd turn it off, erase the evidence, keep covering her tracks. So I did something she wouldn't expect. I ordered a GPS tracker. A small, discreet beacon, the kind used for fleet vehicles and personal security. Battery-powered, undetectable, and compact enough to slip under the driver's seat without her ever noticing. When it arrived, I waited for the right moment. One afternoon, as she was upstairs getting ready for work, I grabbed my keys and walked out to the garage, making it seem like I was retrieving something from my truck. Instead, I crouched beside her Mazda CX-5, reached under the seat, and secured the tracker in place with industrial-strength adhesive. It took less than 30 seconds. She never suspected a thing. Over the next few days, I watched. Whenever she said she was working late, I checked the GPS. And just as I suspected, some of those nights, she wasn't anywhere near her office. Then came Friday. I had made plans, something special. A home-cooked dinner. A good bottle of wine. A night to reset, to remind us both of what we had before things started unraveling. At 6:30, she walked through the front door, looking effortlessly beautiful in a dark blue dress I had never seen before. Her hair was curled, makeup flawless. I smiled, gesturing toward the table, where I had set out grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and a chilled bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. She barely looked at it. "Oh, babe," she said, checking her phone mid-sentence. "I forgot to tell you, I have a work dinner tonight. Last-minute thing with some potential clients." I felt something inside me tighten. "Really? You just got home?" She sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I know. I wasn't expecting it, but my boss asked me to go. It's important. I won't be late." I forced a nod. I had heard this story before. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door. I didn't argue. I just waited. The moment I heard her Mazda back out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone and opened the GPS app. A small red dot appeared, moving through the streets of Boulder, then merging onto Highway 36 toward Denver. I sat in my truck, watching. She was supposed to be at a restaurant. A work dinner. I expected her to head to one of the usual upscale spots downtown, Elway's, Shanahan's, somewhere fitting for business clients. But she wasn't. She was going somewhere else. And for the first time, I was going to find out exactly where. The Capitol Grill, that's where executives took clients. If Rachel had a work dinner, that's where she should have been. But the red dot on my GPS told a different story. It stopped somewhere else. A lounge on Larimer Street. Not a restaurant. Not a corporate event. A high-end cocktail bar. I recognized the name immediately. I took a slow breath, my pulse steady but my thoughts racing. Then I started the truck and pulled out of the driveway. I didn't know exactly what I planned to do once I got there, I just knew I needed to see it for myself. By the time I reached Larimer Street, the city was buzzing with weekend energy. Cars crawled through intersections, their headlights glinting off the damp pavement. Groups of people laughed and spilled onto sidewalks, neon signs casting colorful reflections in the puddles beneath their feet. I found a spot down the block, parked, and waited. Through the lounge's large front windows, I could see the warm glow of Edison bulbs, candlelight flickering on polished wooden tables, professionals sipping overpriced cocktails in their tailored suits and silk dresses. Then I saw her. Rachel. She sat at a corner booth, a drink in hand, her lips curved in laughter at something the man next to her had said. I had never seen him before. Tall. Dark hair. Sharp suit. Confident. Too close. I didn't move. I just watched. She leaned in. He touched her hand. She smiled at him, the kind of smile that used to be mine. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles went white. This wasn't just harmless drinks with coworkers. I could see it in the way she twirled the rim of her glass, in the way she tilted her head when he spoke, in the way her body angled toward him like he was the only person in the room. I had seen enough. But I didn't leave. Because something told me this night wasn't over yet. They stayed at the lounge for almost 2 hours. I never looked away. Then, at 10:15 p.m., Rachel stood, grabbed her coat, and followed him toward the door. I sank lower in my seat as they walked to the valet stand. A black BMW M4 pulled up. I clenched my jaw. She smiled at him, said something I couldn't hear, then, without hesitation, walked around to the passenger side and got in. The BMW eased into traffic. I turned my key in the ignition and followed. I didn't have to tail them for long. Less than 10 minutes later, the BMW turned into the valet entrance of a boutique hotel near Union Station. My stomach dropped. There was no mistaking it now. No more second guessing. No more rationalizing. I pulled into a spot across the street, killed the engine, and sat in silence as I watched. The valet took his keys. Rachel stepped out. He placed his hand on her lower back. She didn't pull away. They walked through the glass doors together, disappearing into the golden glow of the hotel lobby. I stayed frozen in my seat. It was real. All of it. For weeks, I had questioned myself. Told myself I was overreacting. Tried to believe there was still a logical explanation for the distance, the late nights, the little lies. But there was no more room for doubt. Rachel had betrayed me. And as I stared at that hotel entrance, only one thought ran through my mind, over and over again. She has no idea what's coming. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Long enough to watch the valet park the black BMW. Long enough to see the lobby doors swing shut behind them, locking me out of the world I was no longer a part of. I should have been furious. I should have felt rage, fire, something burning through my chest. Instead, all I felt was cold. Like something inside me had simply shut off. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I had my answer. I didn't drive home either. Instead, I let the city swallow me whole, drifting aimlessly past the towering glass buildings of downtown, past the neon glow of bars in Lodo, past the quiet residential streets that no longer felt like home. My mind spiraled in circles, never landing anywhere. What now? By the time I realized where I was, I had pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of town. My headlights flickered against the grimy brick walls of a convenience store, the fluorescent lights buzzing like an old, dying street lamp. I reached for my phone before I even knew what I was doing. Scrolling through my contacts, my thumb hovered for a second. Then I hit call. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Caleb? Damn, man. Long time no talk. I exhaled. What's up, Jason? Jason and I had been friends for over 15 years. Since college. Since before Rachel. Since before all of this. And right now, he was the only person I wanted to talk to. Jason and I had drifted apart after college, life pulling us in different directions. But every now and then, we'd catch up, grab a drink, swap stories, pretend like no time had passed. He had built a solid life for himself, running a high-end contracting business that catered to wealthy clients up in the foothills. "You free tonight?" I asked, my own voice sounding foreign, hollow. Jason didn't hesitate. "Yeah, man. You good?" "Not really." A short pause. "Then, meet me at Mulligan's." Mulligan's was a small, dimly lit dive bar just off Canyon Boulevard. Low ceilings, worn wooden booths, a jukebox in the corner that never stopped playing classic rock. The kind of place where you could drink in peace, where the bartender knew when to top off your glass and when to leave you alone. By the time I got there, the place was half empty. A few guys nursed their beers at the bar, an older couple played a lazy game of pool in the back. I slid into a booth near the window and ordered a whiskey. 5 minutes later, Jason walked in. He hadn't changed much since the last time I saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair now streaked with gray at the temples. Dressed in jeans and a flannel, just like always. He spotted me immediately, gave a nod, and slid into the booth across from me. "All right, man," he said, signaling the waitress for a beer. "Talk to me." I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him everything. The hotel key card. The parking receipt. The tracker I had hidden in Rachel's car. Watching her walk into a hotel with another man, seeing her smile at him the way she used to smile at me. By the time I finished, Jason was leaning back against the booth, arms crossed, his beer untouched. "Jesus, Caleb." I stared at my whiskey, running my thumb along the rim of the glass. Saying it all out loud made it real in a way that nothing else had. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. Jason exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "You thinking about confronting her?" I shrugged. "What's the point? She'll just lie. She'll spin some excuse, maybe even try to turn it around on me. I can already hear it. Caleb, you're overreacting. It's not what it looks like." Jason shook his head. "You staying at the house tonight?" The thought of going back, walking into that house, knowing she'd come home in a few hours and pretend like nothing had happened, made my stomach turn. "I don't think I can." Jason studied me for a long moment, then took a slow sip of his beer. When he spoke again, it wasn't what I expected. "Look, man. You need space." I looked up. "I've got my country place sitting empty right now," he continued. "Why don't you stay there for a while? Give yourself time to figure out your next move." I knew the place he was talking about. A small cabin up near Nederland, tucked deep in the mountains. Nothing but pine trees, winding roads, and quiet. He had bought it a few years back as a weekend retreat but rarely had the time to use it. "I don't know, man." I swirled the whiskey in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "Think about it," Jason said. "No pressure. But if you don't want to go home tonight, you don't have to." The idea settled in my mind like a seed taking root. For weeks, I had been so focused on what Rachel was doing, I hadn't once stopped to consider what I was going to do. What if I just left? Not forever. Not yet. But long enough to clear my head. We sat in silence for a while, the jukebox switching to another old rock song, the low hum of conversation filling the bar. I knocked back the rest of my whiskey, feeling the slow burn spread through my chest. "All right," I said finally. "I'll take you up on that." Jason nodded like he had expected that answer. "Good," he said. "Finish your drink. I'll grab you the keys." I exhaled slowly, letting the decision settle inside me. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for the truth. I was just going to walk away. And she wouldn't even see it coming. I walked into the house that night like nothing had changed. The kitchen was dark except for the soft glow of the microwave clock. The faint scent of Rachel's perfume still lingered in the air, though she was nowhere in sight. I set my keys down on the counter and listened. Silence. She wasn't home yet. I stood there for a long moment, letting it sink in. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It was just a house now. A structure filled with memories of a life I thought was real. A place where I had built something with a woman who had been lying to me for who knows how long. But soon, it wouldn't be my place at all. I took a deep breath, pushing aside the thoughts clawing at the edges of my mind. It was time to focus on what came next. My exit. I knew I couldn't just disappear overnight. That would be too obvious. Rachel would notice. She'd get suspicious. So I took my time. The next morning, while she got ready for work, I sat at the kitchen table like always, nursing a cup of coffee. I watched her move through the kitchen, scrolling through her phone between bites of toast. Big day today? I asked casually. She nodded, barely glancing up. Meetings. The usual. Busy week. That was all I needed to hear. She wasn't paying attention to me. Perfect. That day, while she was at work, I started moving my things. Small things at first, the kind of things she wouldn't notice were gone. A few clothes, my laptop, important documents. The next day, a couple of books from my office, my old leather jacket, some tools from the garage. Each time, I drove them up to Jason's country house in Netherlands, a quiet 2-bedroom cabin tucked deep in the mountains. It was the ideal hideaway. Far enough that Rachel wouldn't just happen to show up, but close enough that I could handle things if I needed to. 3 days. That's all it took to move everything that mattered. By the 4th day, the only things left were furniture and a handful of items I didn't care enough to bring. Rachel never noticed. Or maybe she just wasn't looking. Thursday morning, she was up earlier than usual, standing in front of the mirror in our bedroom, fixing her hair. "You're up early," I said from the doorway, keeping my voice steady. She caught my eye in the mirror. "Yeah. I have a flight to Dallas this afternoon." I leaned against the frame, already counting the hours. "Work trip?" "Yeah, just for the weekend," she said, grabbing her suitcase. "Should be back Sunday night." I nodded slowly. This was it. "Safe travels," I said, turning away before she could read anything in my face. The moment she left for the airport, I got to work. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I had planned this too well for that. I cleared out my closet, packed up the last of my things, and loaded them into my truck. By the time I was finished, the house looked almost the same as it always had, except for one detail. The only thing I left behind was my wedding ring. I placed it on the kitchen table, right next to a folded piece of paper with 5 simple words. I hope it was worth it. That was it. No explanations. No accusations. No anger, no pleading. Just the cold, undeniable truth. When everything was done, I took one last look around. The house was still. Quiet. The home we had built together no longer felt like mine. I walked out the door, climbed into my truck, and drove away. I never looked back. I turned off my phone notifications as soon as I hit the highway. I already knew what was coming. At first, nothing. She wouldn't notice until she got home Sunday night. She'd walk through the door expecting to see me on the couch, maybe cooking dinner in the kitchen. Instead, she'd find the note. And then the messages would start. I checked my phone Monday morning. 18 missed calls. 31 texts. She could yell. She could cry. She could beg. It didn't matter. I was gone. The first message had come in at 7:42 p.m. on Sunday. "Caleb, where are you?" I had been sitting on the porch of Jason's cabin, watching the sun slip behind the pine trees, a cold beer sweating in my hand. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later. "Caleb, seriously. Call me now." Then a missed call. Then another. I ignored them all. By 8:30 p.m., the texts had spiraled, each one more frantic than the last. "What is this? Where are your things? This isn't funny. Caleb, come home." Then, "Did something happen? Are you okay?" And finally, the anger. "Did you seriously just leave without talking to me? What the hell is wrong with you?" And then the one I had been waiting for. "I don't know what you think you know, but you're being ridiculous." Ah. There it was. I took another slow sip of beer, letting the silence stretch between us. I wasn't playing this game. Rachel could deny it all she wanted. But I had been there. I had watched her walk into that hotel. And there was nothing left to say. The messages didn't stop. Monday. "Caleb, please. We need to talk. I swear on everything, there's nothing going on. Can you just tell me where you are? I'm scared. I don't understand." Tuesday. "I miss you. I don't even know what you think happened, but I swear it's not what it looks like. Maybe, just come home. Please." Wednesday. "I can't do this, Caleb. I need to see you. I know you're reading these. Just talk to me. By Thursday, the cracks started to show. Fine. Be a coward. If you're just going to ignore me, then maybe I made a mistake marrying you in the first place. I let out a dry laugh when I read that one. There it was. The moment the sweet apologies failed, she switched to anger. And when that didn't work, she broke completely. It took 9 days. 9 days of silence before I finally got the message I had been waiting for. I'm sorry. Shorter than I expected. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it. Then came another. I messed up, Caleb. I did. But I swear I never wanted to hurt you. And another. It wasn't serious. It was just. I don't even know. I got caught up in things and I made a mistake. A mistake. That's what she called it. Months of lying, sneaking around, stepping out on our marriage, and she reduced it to a mistake. I felt nothing reading those words. Not anger. Not sadness. Not even betrayal anymore. Just relief. Because now, finally, I had the proof straight from her mouth. There was no fixing this. And I wasn't going back. By the end of the second week, the messages slowed. Not because she had given up, because she had shifted strategies. Now, instead of begging, she started making excuses. I was lonely. You were always traveling for work. I felt like we were growing apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. None of it mattered. I had checked out. And that's when she did the one thing I had been waiting for. She lawyered up. A formal letter arrived at Jason's cabin about a month after I left. Rachel had filed for divorce. Uncontested. No demands. No fight. Just done. She probably thought it would get my attention, force me to talk to her. It didn't. I read the paperwork in under 5 minutes, signed where I needed to, and mailed it back without a second thought. I never spoke to her again. The day the divorce was finalized, I was sitting in a small cafe in Netherlands, watching the clouds roll over the mountains, a cup of coffee in my hands. My phone buzzed. A single message. I guess this is it, then. I'll always love you, Caleb. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. And just like that, Rachel was gone. Life moved on. 3 years had passed since I walked out of that house without looking back. 3 years since I left my wedding ring on the table and vanished from Rachel's life without a trace. I had rebuilt everything from the ground up. At first, I stayed at Jason's cabin. The mountains gave me the space I needed to clear my head, to figure out who I was without her. Eventually, I moved down into Boulder, renting a small but comfortable place on the edge of town. I took up hiking again, something I hadn't done in years. Got back into working with my hands, helping Jason out on projects when he needed an extra set of skilled labor. I still worked in software, but I did it on my terms now. No more endless travel, no more long nights grinding for companies that didn't care about me. And yeah, I started dating again. Nothing serious. Nothing rushed. Just good people, good moments. No expectations. Life was simple. Peaceful. And then, out of nowhere, there she was. It was a warm summer afternoon in Boulder. I had stopped by my usual coffee shop, Flatiron Brews, just off Pearl Street. I grabbed an iced coffee, planning to sit on the patio for a while, let the day slow down. The cafe was packed, students, tourists, remote workers tapping away at their laptops. The low hum of conversation mixed with the sound of milk frothing behind the counter. I stood in line, scrolling through my phone, waiting for my turn to order. And then, a voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 3 years. Caleb. I froze. It wasn't like hearing a ghost. Ghosts don't carry the weight of memories in their voices. Ghosts don't wreck you. They don't stand in front of you, flesh and blood, carrying the weight of memories in their voice. But there she was. Rachel. She looked different. Not bad. Not worn down. Just different. Like the version of her I once knew had been stripped away, layer by layer. Her hair was shorter, her makeup minimal. And in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Hesitation. I didn't say anything at first, letting the silence stretch between us. She swallowed. Shifted on her feet. I wasn't sure if it was you. I finally found my voice. It's me. We ended up outside, sitting at one of the patio tables. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know how she found me. Why she was here. You're probably wondering how I tracked you down, she said, stirring her drink absently with a straw. It crossed my mind. She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. I ran into Claire a few weeks ago. That name took me a second to place. Claire? A mutual friend, Rachel said. Someone I hadn't talked to in years. She sighed, tapping her fingers against her cup. She mentioned seeing you around Boulder. I didn't pressure her for details, but I had to find you. Why? I finally met her gaze, and that's when I saw it. Regret. The weight of everything that had happened, pressing into her shoulders. She took a slow breath. Because I needed to tell you the truth. She didn't sugarcoat it. After I left, everything unraveled. At first, she convinced herself she was fine, that she could move on without consequence. But reality hit fast. The guy she had risked everything for, the one she had thrown away our marriage for, turned out to be exactly what I knew he was. A liar. A manipulator. Someone who cared only about himself. She told me how he got caught by his own fiancé. How he threw her under the bus, claiming she had pursued him. She let out a bitter laugh. I lost my job, Caleb. Word got out about the whole mess. It was impossible to stay. I had to resign. She fell hard. And no one was there to catch her. You were right, she said, voice quieter now, looking down at her coffee. I didn't respond. Because what was there to say? She had made her choices. And now, she was living with them. I've thought about you every day, she admitted. I know I don't deserve your time. But I had to see you. I said nothing. Rachel's fingers curled around her cup. Caleb, I know I can't undo the past. I know I hurt you in ways I can't even understand. She swallowed hard. But if there's even the slightest chance that we could try again. I exhaled slowly. There it was. The thing I had been expecting from the moment I turned around and saw her in that cafe. She wanted a second chance. But some things can't be fixed. Some things aren't meant to be rewritten. I took a slow sip of my coffee, setting the cup down before answering. No. Rachel's expression faltered, hope flickering into something raw. Caleb, please. She leaned forward. I know how this sounds. I know how I must look. But I swear to you, I'm not the same person I was back then. If I could go back, if I could change it. But you can't, I cut in, my voice steady. And I don't want you to. She blinked. What? I leaned back in my chair, taking my time. I don't want some version of you that never made those mistakes, I said. Because that version of you never existed. You made your choices. And I made mine. I gestured between us, the table, the coffee cups, the years of silence crumbling into a mess of regret and desperation. It's not happening. Rachel sat frozen, her hands gripping her cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. But I still love you, she whispered. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Not pity. Just finality. I don't, I said. Rachel never gave up easily. After that day at the cafe, the messages started. At first, long, heartfelt emails. I just want to talk again. I miss you more than I can explain. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but if we could just meet again, maybe we could figure this out. When I didn't respond, they shifted. I found a job in Portland. Maybe a fresh start in a new place could be good for us. Would you consider moving away together? Somewhere far from all of this? I stared at the messages, shaking my head. She still didn't get it. She thought we could outrun the past. That if we just started over in a new city, we could erase what happened. But running doesn't change who you are. And Rachel had already shown me exactly who she was. I didn't answer. I blocked her email. And just like that, she was gone again. Months passed. Seasons changed. Rachel faded into the past, just like everything else that didn't belong in my future. I kept moving forward. Kept working. Kept hiking. Kept building the life I should have had from the start. One night, I found myself standing outside, looking over the mountain ridge near my home. The air was crisp. The sky clear. The stars endless. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. No baggage. No ghosts. No regrets. Just me. Living my own damn life. And that was more than enough. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Share this video with your loved ones, it might brighten their day or give them a new perspective. And before you go, check out the video on your screen. It's another heartfelt story you won't want to miss.